welcome to episode 1 of the Q Suite. This week on the Q Suite, we had Douglas Figueredo, who is the Senior Vice President and Senior Managing Director of Corporate Marketing for Webster Bank.
Ken, it sounds like you have some history with him. Do you want to tell our listeners about that?
As a matter of fact, I do have a bit of a history with Doug. So Doug and I were both 19 or something graduates of Lake High School in Winter Park, Florida. And, he and I certainly knew of each other in high school, but didn't really kind of register one of another very much, and certainly traveled in different groups. But he and I reconnected when we both had moved to New York. When I first I reconnected with him a number of years ago, he was actually working with Lazard, the very large investment banking firm. And that certainly was consistent with some of the things I was working on. I was working in the financial services industry. These days, he is the Senior Vice President and Senior Managing Partner for Corporate Marketing for Webster Bank, which is going through an acquisition. And one of the things that we'll certainly talk about with Doug is some of the leadership aspects and requirements of an acquisition and what that takes, but also some more specific ideas about how he has seen the evolution of ERGs. And I know that's something that's important to you, James.
Yeah, I think what I really liked about our discussion was talking about creating those support networks. Find your community,
Yeah.
talk, support each other through these type of culture moments at work. And I'm excited for our listeners to hear that discussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it really is the idea changing from kind of a more external facing ERG that goes out and does sort of activism in the workplace, or is it really about protecting your employees and about kind of holding them closer in this moment? So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about with Doug. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, episode 1 of the Q Suite with Douglas Figueredo. Doug, thank you so much for joining us in the Q Suite.
Ken, James, it's so great to have this chance to just chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I do know each other a bit from the past, and we'll get into that in a second. But for our listeners and viewers, can you just give a little bit of a sense of sort of where you are now, what your career has been, what that trajectory has looked like for you?
Sure. So currently, I'm head of corporate marketing at Webster Bank, having arrived at that through a sort of career of digital, all the digital stuff that we talk about so easily, all the digital development and scrums and all these things. But before we even had these names for these things, so I've back in the early days of building your own computer. So that's when I started sort of my corporate career. Yeah, before that, I had a good 10-year career as a performer. Ken will remember from back home, I was always a singer and a performer early in my life. And so that's what brought me to New York City, which is where I live out this window. And had a good 10-year career. Yeah.
Yeah, out my window too.
Oh,
I'm in Jersey, but it's
exactly.
out.
Yeah, right out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Good 10-year career, but in the end, I sort of realized, I'd like to have things like health insurance all the time, and I'd like to not travel all the time, and I'd like to have a relationship, and all of that self-discovery that comes with that. And so I transitioned out and sort of became, a regular corporate guy.
So listen, in full disclosure, you and I were in the class of 19 at Lake Cal
Well,
High School
yeah.
in Winter Park, Florida, and two queer kids. I don't know if we ever kind of registered that in one another, but uh,
Well, well, and
go
I have
ahead.
to say, like, I'm
Go
actually
ahead.
from Fern Park, Florida, which is like,
Uh,
that was a Cumberland Farms and a Kmart,
yes, it
and a
was.
lot of orange grows and cows, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how you couldn't, you must have been headless if you didn't realize that I was gay. I think that everyone did, except I didn't know what that was at all. I was so innocent. I had no idea what any of it meant. You
Doug,
certainly didn't be that way.
I didn't. I felt exactly as you did.
Yeah.
Exactly as you did. So, I mean, I think that so much of that's coming from inside. The call's coming from inside the house. I think a little
Yeah.
bit on that one. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, look, I feel like, I mean, look at us now, who we are, sort of living in New York City, living the dream. Have had sort of a really very
Mhm.
successful corporate careers. I know that you have at least. And that Seminole County, Florida education didn't do us so bad.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I am curious, if you project back to that moment and you see yourself now, I've done this before. What do you think that kid would say?
You know, everyone around me. Oh, there's this photo that I think back on at graduation, and two people gave me the same card, and it was a card, and there's a photo of me with this card, holding this card, which is New York City on it, and everyone knew that I was going to go away, that I was going to leave, and I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that I needed more. And so I think, I've been reflecting a lot on our sort of our high school days, since we have that connection. And, I was always very focused on, because I couldn't be who I was, right? I didn't understand who I was in the context of anything, right? And so I was very focused on music and what I wanted to do. And I had these sort of blinders on. And that person knew he was going to go somewhere. And so if I could go back, I could say, "Hey, you did make it out, and you made the life you dreamed of, and that was in your imagination." So that
Yeah,
part of it is this connection. I had an imagination for what could happen. I just didn't know how it would happen, and here I am, and I could have never guessed any of this stuff.
that's amazing. Yeah, I'm getting a little.
I know.
Go ahead, James. You got a question?
Yeah, no, Doug, it's great having you here, and it's great to see, you and Ken's connection and hearing about your journey, as a queer person, from a small town. I could only imagine, myself, I come from the New York City metropolitan area. So there was a growing up again, both your generations had really kind of carved the path for me to feel comfortable being an out person in high school. So I was one of the fortunate few that was out in high school and didn't have any stigma or whatnot. So I really just want to give kudos to both of you. So thank you.
Can you
But I do.
imagine?
Oh, sorry, you go, Ken. Sorry.
No, can you imagine such a thing? Not feeling like you were worried about stigma. It's an amazing thing. Yeah, makes me so happy to hear.
I
Oh,
always joke that I feel like we grew up in Leave It to Beaver world. I lived in a neighborhood that had one entrance. It was very sheltered, and some of that was good.
Mhm.
We didn't have to address anything major in the world. We really didn't. We were that protected. However, it kept the complexities of the world away. And so when I left to go to college, I went to Rochester. I went to the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. I was not prepared for anything in the world. I had no idea what was coming, and that really stayed with me for years and into my life in New York.
Yeah,
Everything was always so new to me.
yeah,
yeah. No,
yeah.
I could only imagine. And that's actually a really good pivot to my question. Doug is, taking your experience, childhood, performing, whatnot, into your leadership role that you are in now, is how did you build on those skills and lean on those skills that you've had as a performer and show up as a leader, with your approach in communication, empathy in the industry you're in?
Well, I think, some of it is performer, some of it is that closeted child, right? That person
Yeah.
who compartmentalized everything. So in some ways, in the hardest moments, we're going through a merger at my bank right now. And, that's a lot, that's hard change for a lot of people. Well, it's innate in me to compartmentalize when something happens, right? As a gay young kid and growing up, I was closeted for many years, for a good 15 years in my corporate life, right? Um, there's everyone will understand this. You don't react to anything. No one can see you react. So you're always attentive and listening. And so that part kicks in. What's changed for me over the years, and 20 years of therapy have helped, is this understanding of, hey, this thing is happening, around me, but it's not happening to me, and I'll be okay. And so then what that has afforded me is this ability to be there for the people that are all, the people who report to me, and to, the compassion that I show myself, that I've learned to do over the years, I give to them. Now the performer helps me to, give it a little bit of a Mary Poppins spin. So I know when to smile. I know when to be kind and gracious and soft spoken. I know when I have to sort of, the pep talk has to come up, right? So I can do all of those things, and I'm not afraid to do them because I did them on stage forever, right? So those things sort of bleed in these times of change, and what scares a lot of people.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the merger. So I'm really curious. I've been through a couple. I've worked for some pretty acquisitory companies, and so I know I've been on both sides of the desk for that particular transaction. Talk to me about the leadership skills that are unique that you need in that environment, um, as the organization literally is being kind of, thrown into the air.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of experience from both sides. I worked in investment banking for a lot of for
Yeah,
20 years of my career. And so there a lot of the mergers are put together, right? And
yeah,
now I've already been through one bank merger and now I'm on a second bank merger. I learned a lot in the last bank merger. I learned that like you really have to be adaptable. You cannot get stuck in any one thing. It's sort of like my music life. When you write a song, you're writing lyrics, you can never fall in love too much with the lyric you wrote because you're going to end up changing it 3 times, 10 times or 100 times. And so in this world of merger, you can't fall in love with any one idea, any one timeline. You have to be ready for change. You don't know what's coming up. There's so much unexpected, and so the best thing you can do is just be ready to pivot, pivot to the next thing, and keep going. Part of that is just, I have a network of friends that have worked at companies across all of New York, as we all do. One of the benefits of being in New York City, that we all work with all these people that
yeah,
work everywhere. So
yeah,
any of those people are just a call away, an email away, a text away, a question away of like, hey, have you ever dealt with this thing? What do I do? Right. So that guidance is what helps me, and then in turn, I turn that to the teams that work for me.
that wasn't where I was expecting you to go, but I'm so glad that you did, because that idea of kind of lighting up your mentor network, that sort of the network of people that you have around you. Could you talk more about that? I mean, that's something that I do, that I know is a special sauce that I have that helps me to solve things because of the network of people that I have. And I literally feel like I've got an encyclopedia in my head and go, okay, this is about that. That's the right person.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way?
I do, and I think there's sort of two. There maybe there's more than two. There's a multiple sort of support networks, right? You have the people that have gone through these mergers, right? You have people that have worked in corporate America their whole careers. You have people that your emotional support in a corporate sense, right? And you have these like sort of people that are your mentors, but they're not the people you work with, right? I think that this network should they really they can't. I shouldn't say should, right? I think that this network is probably more valuable when it's outside of the place you're working, right?
Yeah.
Because then you can sort of say, hey, this is going on. I feel this way about it. What do you think? What do you know? So this sort of like personal network of support helps you emotionally, and then helps you just with like, hey, this, and this have to occur. Hey, did you know that there's this law about whatever that
Right.
has to happen, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's what's so valuable, and I tap into that so freely. I wasn't able to, since we're, this is, about, LGBTQ, right? This is that network was not anything that I really could lean into when I was closeted,
Yeah.
because my friends were closeted, I was closeted, everyone was afraid of everything, right? And now with this sort of openness that I have in my life, I'm completely out. I've been determined to do that. I just feel I'm not afraid to ask anybody a question about anything, and nor am I afraid be to expose, like, what am I scared of, right?
Yeah.
Or what I don't know. What you find out is most people don't know anything.
Yeah. And
No
then the
one knows what's
penalty
happening. We're
and the
figuring it.
penalty yeah, and the penalty's not death. That's the thing
Yeah.
about being wrong. The penalty's not death. Everything will be fine. And I think that's one of the lessons that I had to learn,
Yeah.
because I felt like, I performance was so important to me and I had to do, everything I could. And if I failed, it just felt like something elemental had happened.
Yeah.
You learn over time that that's not really the case.
I worked with a woman. She's Italian. At my last 2 jobs ago, and she had this wonderful attitude about everything, and I remember I was worried about, I reported to, some C-suite person, and I was worried about what their reaction was, and she turned to me. We were like at an event. She turned to me. She said, "What is she going to do? Kill us?"
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
those words changed me. I think that all the time. What are they gonna do? Kill me?
Yeah.
They're not.
Hmm.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And in the end, most people are happy that you could just resolve their problem. You
Yeah.
know.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. And to kind of pivot to our next question, which is really good, talking about authenticity, support networks, is I do want to take a moment and talk about employee resource groups.
Mhm.
Doug, you introduced yourself as a co-chair for one of the ERGs within your company.
Yeah.
So talking about building your network of support, I know that ERGs can be a good lever for that. Can you talk us through what that looks like at your company?
Sure.
And, you know, what was your vision as, an executive sponsor, co-chair on building and growing the ERG at your company?
Well, I helped form a pre-merger to the other merger when we were a different bank. I helped form the first LGBT group there, and going into that, um, I only had the model of the other ERGs that are out there, right? The Women's Network, the Latino, whatever.
Mhm.
I had their model. And so I just fully expected, oh, well, we'll just follow their model and everyone will get together and we'll do the thing and we'll have this leadership group and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I found is that our dynamic is very different. It is rooted in some trauma, fear, deep affection, deep love, deep loyalty. But it's just all these different things that I don't know if they're in the other groups. I never saw them in the other groups, right? And people don't necessarily come at their best because they're so afraid. And so that has been a challenge for me to understand, right? And for the larger organization, because we just don't operate under sort of, I don't think, under the sort of the same rules as much as we try to. I'd say, currently, in the last, Ken and I were talking about this before. It's under current circumstances, like the world is very challenging right now. There's been sort of a change. We went from, you know, 3 4 years ago being able to like really talk about who we are as people and our pronouns and all of these things, right? How we're really like educating people in our world, to being kind of afraid to even talk about anything. And that shift, whether people realize it or not, happened. And so I'd say in this last year it's really been, it's been different. I think I've tried to bring a focus on, hey, we need to really support our people. Let's get back to the basics of who we are and get back to the basics of our stories.
Yeah.
And, what how can we support? We have the other thing that's different is we have parents. We don't, not everybody, we have allies who are
Yeah.
parents of LGBT kids, right? And so that's something that I never considered, right? I just always thought, oh, it'd be just another lesbian, another gay person, another transgender, whatever. And instead, I've got these parents that are in the group and they need support. And so
Mm.
it's just been a big, big realignment this year. It's like maybe we don't do as many events, and maybe we find ways to support the people. And I have to tell you, that's what's on my heart, right? I've always, as I go on here to talk, but I'll tell you, I have always felt this connection to, the person that works in the branch that's sort of not in the middle of nowhere, because I can't, nowhere's nearly in the middle of nowhere like Fern Park, Florida, where I'm from. And
Ah.
30 years ago, right?
It's not that small.
It's not that small, but there's still people that are closeted, and they come to
Yeah.
me at an event and they'll say, "Oh, no one knows that I'm gay," and it's like, well, why not? If not now, when? Be who you are.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to do. And I think the focus of the group in this last year, what I've been driving towards is like, let's find a way to support these people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's an important mission of ERGs, right? Is
Uh-huh,
including our advocates and our allies into it,
uh-huh,
beyond those who sit in the groups, but also, yeah, caregivers, parents, friends of, of LGBTQ plus. I think it's important. And some, allies, parents don't know how to show up.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we're highlighting all the good stuff that you're doing, Doug,
yeah,
and wanted to hone in on the safety piece a little bit. Is I know it's great to hear a leader wanting to focus on the safety and making people feel like they belong at a company.
uh-huh.
And for folks who don't have, or our listeners who don't have ERGs or who want to build an ERG, how do you intentionally build safety, through an ERG in your industry or beyond?
Well, it has to start with visibility. You can only provide safety if you provide safety for yourself. And that's hard to do because
Oh,
you never know
wow.
who you're talking to in business, you know.
Yeah.
But in the end, uh, you know, I when I was interviewing back at Sterling National Bank, which became Webster, I was very determined. I met everyone in creation in that interview process, and I have to say, everyone I met was nicer than the one before. It was a really unique environment of just really great people. But I was determined to be who I am in every interview. And I always refer to my husband. I refer to my life freely. We all, James, I don't know if you lived this way. I'm sure Ken and I did, where we were always changing pronouns, or we didn't, or we just simply didn't say that we went with our partner or whoever, our boyfriend. We never said those things, right? And I just was determined in my interview process with each person, I was going to reveal that about myself. So moving forward, when you were creating, if you want to create an ERG in your organization, first of all, you have to make sure that you are, it's not about waving a flag everywhere. It's just about being, everyone talks about their kids, their lives. They went out with their spouse to do this, that, and the other thing. And you just have to live in that space and take that risk to do that. And people will ultimately, they'll support you. If they don't support you, they'll respect you. And if they don't respect you, maybe they shouldn't be in the organization, right?
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I was going to say, as much as I think we've had this realignment towards, or I've had this realignment towards, how do I support people in the ERG? The other thing is we still at a business, so we have to make sure that we are showing the business why it's important to have us.
Yeah.
And some of that is we bring a unique perspective. We all know that, as every group brings a unique perspective, but you need to have that at the table, especially like for us at a bank. People walk through our branches and our online products. They want to know who they're dealing with, and they want to see themselves. And if we don't show them that, they'll go to somewhere else. So, so it's very important that we, you also make the case to the business of why this group is important, why they should support it, and why they should encourage it. They would not have an employee like me who brings my unique perspective, my enthusiasm, my excitement to their work if they brought in the closeted person who existed before me.
Yeah. The interesting thing, you and I shared financial services largely in common. So I think we've both spent the majority of our career, at least of our professional career, in financial services. And so I know that it has a special vocabulary to it and a special kind of set of values. It can be a pretty high strung place. And talk to me about what you feel the unique aspects of being an out person in financial services are.
Well, what's unique about it? I'd say, and it depends on the world you're in, right? When I was in
Yeah.
sort of in the investment banking world, that can be. I hate to say bro culture because it's not even. It's like something even different from that, you know.
Yeah.
But it can be very, very. You need to be a very certain way. You need to be Brooks Brothers all the way, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not that, you can't break in, and you can be dismissed, and you can be not heard.
Yeah.
All of those things, right? That we don't want. Um, Now, regional banking is very different. It's all about relationships,
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of person, right? Um, so I'd say in finance as a whole, right? What can you do? Well, we can only ever be ourselves wherever we are.
Right.
So, should you adapt for either climate and choose to fight a battle in a certain way? I don't know that we should be fighting battles. I don't know that we need to be trying to force things to change as much as I think we need to be who we are in every environment, be authentic, be honest. And that's all you can rely on. And then you'll find you'll be in the best place to make change, good change, and you'll be in the best place for yourself. And it might not be a company. They might have to learn the lesson what happens when you don't support people of different mindsets, right?
Have you ever walked away from an opportunity or lost an opportunity because of your sexuality, because of your orientation?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. Um, I have. And that's more, I'd say more recent in life. I'd say in the last, 10 years or so, where, there was a period where I was, on a job search, and as we all go through it one time or another, I've been very fortunate to be at companies for very long times, right? But, everyone, the transition happens. And, getting kind of far into an environment and just realizing like, these are not the people I want to work with. They want something that is like not who I am, and I'm not gonna like it. So
Yeah.
but that's just maturity. You just sort of I had the benefit of time. Some people don't have the benefit. Some people have to like make their mortgage and feed their kids and all of that, and it's a challenge. So like I'm not going to judge anybody for that, but it is better if you can be authentic and
Absolutely.
you
And
can walk away from a bad choice.
yeah. What about the reverse? Do you feel like you lost an opportunity because you were out that you wanted?
I don't know. I don't know if I have. I had, this is the whole thing about the tricky thing in life. I would say, maybe in the 2010s, right in there, I was a little more vocal in social spaces and online and all that about things, before marriage. Like I was like, we should have marriage. Like those things.
Yeah.
I was becoming
Mhm.
sort of the advocate for those things, right? And so, later, when, I had a transition end, right? A job ended and I had to find a new one. And, a family member said to me, you lost that job because, you were being so out. And I was like, I don't, maybe that's true. I don't think so, but who knows?
Yep.
Yep.
I've had the
I,
exact same conversation with a family member one time. They've said, "You're gonna get fired." And I'm like, "If they fire me for this, then I don't wanna work there."
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have the
Absolutely.
luxury, but as you said earlier, I have the luxury to say that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
James, you were gonna ask a question.
No, well, I just wanted to agree. It's just it's a cause that you believe in, and if a company doesn't want, you know, uh, to value your advocacy, then it's not the right company for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
You know. But I do want to talk again about. Uh, we talked about, if we want to start an ERG, Doug,
Hmm.
in a company. Let's talk about the reverse. How can leaders create a safe space, prioritize, you know, the feeling of belonging that goes beyond compliance and like EEO compliance?
Well, I think, I think that leaders, let's say you have a leadership in a company and they want, and to your scenario, they want to start an ERG, they probably want to start that because they have some story in their lives, right? Some family member, some best friend. And so what can they do? Well, they can start talking about that best friend from high school who is gay now, right? Or, their daughter who's a lesbian or whoever, whatever it is, they have to come out of the closet, which is hard for, they're
Yeah.
scared, like my mom to this day is still scared of talking about her gay son, It's like, well, yeah,
Oh,
I don't know what
yeah.
you're hiding, you know? But it's, so I think they have to be visible. If they're visible and they talk about these things, they're going to naturally attract, it's like the law in the universe. You're going to
Mhm.
attract, what you want,
Mhm.
right? So they'll attract to themselves people in their organization who, they tell their story to somebody that they might be in the closet or is not talking about it. They might bring that out. And then they can build a network around having it. I don't know that you can just put an email out saying, "Hey, we're looking to start an ERG." I mean, maybe you can and
Right.
people will step up, but I think, there has to be a personal story to it. Because I'll tell you why, because, there's somebody in our ERG who's really, I respect so much. He's really fantastic, but he often says, "Hey, I don't want to be the poster child for being the gay man in this group, right? I don't want the company to be able to do that. Like it is part of my identity, but I'm also this amazing banker, blah blah blah, right?" And
Mhm.
so I think, if you don't share the personal, then you can't have the professional on both sides. So I think, companies want to start that. Well, why are you advocating for it? Is there I think there has to be a personal reason. It can't just be business reason. But then but because the business reasons are built, we know
Yeah.
why it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I don't have to convince anybody of. What I have
Yeah.
to convince people is to come out of the closet. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Right. In
And
whatever
it's safe
form their
too.
closet is. Yeah.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And just one last follow-up, and then I'll pass it back to Ken. Is there anything unique about the banking or financial services industry when thinking about creating these safe spaces for LGBTQ plus folks?
You know what's unique is that, like, especially in the regional banking, right? Is that we are so community minded. Like our
Mhm.
communities matter, and we are in the communities, with a lot of financial services and support and education, and those things are like it's like the lifeblood of a bank, right, in a community. And so it is already in the nature of our kind of financial world to want to reach out and to help people. And so it is just another step to say, hey, we have these people internally that like could use this advocacy, this help, this support to grow their careers, to grow their knowledge, to grow their courage, to bring those ideas to the business, and then to make those connections in the community as well, to bring all those things together.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I worked for Fiserv for many years, and our clients were community banks. So, I loved community banks. I met some of the coolest people, at, the, State Bank of West Virginia. Like, there were some really cool people that I met, that in unexpected places, thanks to community banking. So, I absolutely hear you. So,
Mhm.
we typically wrap up with kind of a two-parter. So we do a bit of a rapid fire. And then James is going to ask you about your mentor moment, but let's start with the rapid fire first. First rapid fire question is, what is one thing from our home, Lake Howell, the Orlando area, whatever, that you still think about on a daily basis that still is incorporated in your life?
Gosh. Rapid fire. I have to say, we're the home of Walt Disney World, right? And back then it was one park, and then maybe two by the time we graduated, so it was very, very small, right? Epcot Center was built in was came alive in '82. What I love about that time for us is that we were in a city that was growing, that
Yeah,
had access to this magical world that was so big and this amazing brand. And so I probably, a day doesn't go by that I don't remember sort of like going to Disney as a kid, working there as an adult, singing there as a performer. And so that really always like bleeds forward into my life. I think about it all the time.
cool. Okay, next question. What is the one word that you would use to describe the best executive sponsor?
I always come back to the word vulnerable. I just think we just have to find vulnerability for each other. And so an executive sponsor who can be vulnerable about what they don't know, is the one that can make the most difference.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And last one. What is a secret skill that you acquired as a performer that you still use in meetings today? I know you've got one.
Well, I've got a bunch, right? I have a little bag of tricks. But I will say, I worked with an amazing musical director, Derek Johnson, back in my Disney days, right? And he's Voices of Liberty were his group and everything, right? And I worked in an offshoot group, and we were singing something in the group, and it was just like, sound to the wall. The group was huge, and we finished, and he said, loud is not thrilling, thrilling is thrilling. And he said, let's go back and let's like do this over and like let's build to something, right? And so I think about that all the time because we all get excited. I get very excited and enthusiastic about things, right? And in the end, you've got to build towards something. You can't just come out of the gate like slamming everybody with what you're going to do. We're going to accomplish this in the workplace. And this initiative is going to, no. How are you going to get there? What's the story? Like, let's get to that thrilling moment that we're all excited about. We all understand where we're heading, and then we'll do that. So I think that's probably the big thing that I think about the most.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great advice,
Yeah.
right? And to close, we always close with the Q Suite mentoring moment. So the Q Suite mentoring moment is, what's one moment you had with a mentor or person that's you lean on for advice that has affected your career life, the trajectory of your journey up until this point?
Um, I think back to, I worked at a really big investment bank. This was when I was transitioning out of being a performer. And I worked with a leader there who just had this gift for saying, why don't you try this? I bet you'd be good at X. You want to try the next thing. And that person is who got me into technology, who got me into development, who got me in blah, 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 blah. Like, and here I am, right? Head of marketing group.
Yeah.
And so, what I learned from that person is just to look at every person and try to see like what are their skills that they don't even know they have, and what is their aptitude, where's their aptitude leaning, and can I give them an opportunity to do that thing, and can I encourage them through it where I don't have to do it, they get to do it, but I just get to shape it along the way and kind of nudge them in, and then like let them find out that they're like really good at things that they had no idea that they could do. And so that is the mentoring that, like, has been central to me. That person changed me because they had that same idea for me.
I love it.
We
Doug,
love
thank you
it.
so
Yeah.
much. This has been amazing. It's so nice to see you. We need to get together more often. We're just a river away,
No,
over here in Jersey City. But thank you so much for being on the Q Suite.
it's my pleasure. Great, speaking with you both, and happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Pride.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks so much.